I'm sure most of us horror fans can relate to this next statement. My watch list is massive and ever expanding, so I have decided to try and do something about it in 2025, even if that is only putting a small dent in my watch list. So what I have decided to do is pick 25 movies that I am making it a personal mission to watch throughout this year, and I'm going to come back in December and actually hold myself accountable, and we're going to see how many of these 25 movies that I have picked I have actually watched. And I am a little bit of a perfectionist, so it's either going to be absolutely everything or I'm going to have forgotten about them all, and it's going to be hardly any of them. These are probably going to be 25 movies that I don't end up doing video reviews for here on my channel unless requested otherwise. So if there is something on this list that you desperately want to see me review, drop a comment down in the comments section and I will see what I can do with my scheduling. If you're new here, I go by Hordes, and if you're not new, welcome back! I talk about horror movies here on my channel on Mondays and Fridays, so if that sounds like something you'd be interested in, maybe hit that subscribe button and join the Horde. But without further ado, here are the 25 movies that I have picked that I am going to try and watch throughout 2025. Feast from 2005 is a creature feature action horror. In a rural bar in Nevada, a motley crew of patrons must band together in order to survive when they are attacked by a horde of monstrous creatures. I am only including the first entry from this series on my list, but just assume that if I like the first one, I will probably go on to watch the second and the third ones. I just didn't want to use 3 out of my 25 entries on this list for the same franchise, so consider this for every single thing on this list that happens to be a multiple entry series or franchise. A few of you actually recommended Feast to me over the past year, and it has actually been sat on my shelves since before I actually started my channel. Like, there isn't a deep meaning behind why I want to watch Feast either. I just saw the DVD cover like a couple of years ago and thought the creature looked really cool, and I want to see people with conventional and unconventional weapons beat the crap out of them. Like, that's about it. Sometimes you just want a movie that's not too thinky, and an action horror normally ticks that box to me. Like, who doesn't want to watch creatures getting their heads bashed in? Dead Rising Watchtower from 2015 is a zombie action horror. Present-day East Mission, Oregon is locked down after police find the bodies of what appear to be victims of a zombie attack. When 2 ambitious Net 2.0 reporters Chase and Jordan get inside the quarantine zone to report on a large group of civilians trapped there in the inner city dome stadium, they realise that they're waiting for a rescue that simply isn't coming. Speaking of unconventional weaponry, Dead Rising happens to be one of my favourite video game franchises of all time, and if you haven't played them and you love zombies and things that do not take themselves seriously in the slightest, treat yourself and go and play something from the Dead Rising franchise. Like, they are all great for their own reasons, and I love that the developers were like, yeah, it's absolutely not inspired by Dawn of the Dead from 2004. Shh. No, it's not. Stop drawing comparisons. Like, you try and convince yourself that, developers. It's clearly inspired by Dawn of the Dead from 2004. But video game franchises that get adapted into movie franchises tend to be terrible, to put it politely. The exceptions being like the original Silent Hill movie and Siren, but the rest are like pretty terrible. So I'm curious to see where Dead Rising is going to fall in this, because it doesn't take itself so seriously. I'm kind of annoyed that the main character isn't Frank West though, because if you've played the games, you'll know that Frank West happens to be the main protagonist in 3 out of the 5 games, I believe. The only ones he's not is Dead Rising 2, but he's in Dead Rising 2.5, and he's not in Dead Rising 3. But the character that they've made for the movie is literally just a reskinned version of Frank West, so I guess we're going to find out if this is just another terrible, terrible video adaptation, or whether I'm going to like this one, because I actually like the game it's based on. Dokamushi Toxic Insects from 2016 is a Japanese death game horror. 7 strangers wake up locked in a dark abandoned school. With no food and no idea why they are there or what they're supposed to do, they see a big stock pot, a butcher's knife, and a watch to count down 7 days. They must fight to stay alive until there is only one person left or go insane due to hunger and stress. There was always going to be a couple of Japanese horror movies on this list because anybody that is familiar with me will know that that is my go-to country for horror movies. And of course, there was going to be a couple of death games thrown in on this list, but Dokimushi Toxic Insects happens to also be another one of my buzz genres. And this is a death game where the participants have to eat each other in order to stay alive. So, it's a cannibal death game. It's like, ding ding ding, it couldn't be more perfect for me if it tried. And the fact that this is also based on a manga, which is apparently even more brutal and gory and what the actual hell than the movie, makes me interested in the movie even more. Like, I love a death game, and I love a movie that makes you go, what the actual hell am I looking at? And that seems to be the definition of this movie, according to those that have actually seen this online. And there really isn't that many people that have actually reviewed this movie. We're talking like 60 on IMDb. So now I'm even more intrigued by that as well. Spare Parts from 2020 is an action horror. As a result of an act conducted by an overenthusiastic fan, 4 female bandmates wake up with their limbs replaced by mechanized weapons. Now they must fight for survival in a gladiator-style arena in a sadistic town as a bloodthirsty crowd cheers them on. I didn't mention it when I talked about my favourite horror movies back around my birthday, but another one of my favourite movies is Raz from 2013. And there is something about that movie that just feeds my soul. It's an underground all-women's fight club where everybody is fighting for their own reasons and is absolutely determined to win at all costs. Like, I grew up a wrestling fan, and I'm still a wrestling fan to this day. And there is something about strong women throwing hands that feeds my soul that nothing else can actually come close to. It is one of my favourite things on the planet. Now, Spare Parts is women throwing hands, but instead of hands they have like knives and guns and flamethrowers. It is the wildest looking thing, and it would not be out of place in the Borderlands franchise, another video game franchise that I love with all my soul. Do not watch the movie. It is actual garbage and hurts my soul about as much as wrestling feeds my soul. And sometimes I just like an unserious movie that is gory and violent, and that is Spare Parts. The Bigfoot Trap from 2023 is a horror drama. A journalist's life is changed forever when he investigates a Bigfoot fanatic who claims to possess the only Bigfoot trap. He doesn't believe the legend, and his mistake soon turns deadly when he becomes trapped inside by the insane Sasquatch hunter. Hordes has picked another Bigfoot/Sasquatch movie. What a surprise, says absolutely no one familiar with my channel, considering that I just picked Abominable back in my winter picks for this year. So yes, I'm watching another Bigfoot/Sasquatch movie, but the Bigfoot Trap from 2023 appeals to me for a different reason. We're dealing with a character in this who is determined to prove that Sasquatch and Bigfoot actually exist, and is prepared to go to all kinds of lengths, including killing someone who tries to expose them for faking this kind of stuff. Now, there is all kinds of skepticism that goes around in the cryptids world, like, does this thing actually exist? Does this thing not actually exist? And it's a lot of, like, debunking. So I'm interested in this one because it seems to be both sides of the argument going against each other, but in a much more lethal kind of way. In the trailer, you see somebody wearing a Bigfoot costume actually get demasked. So now I want to know, is there actually going to be a Bigfoot/Sasquatch in the Bigfoot Trap? And if so, how are we going to do this? Bloody Crayons from 2017 is a Filipino slasher horror. A group of graduating students head to an island to finish their final school projects. They find that there is a mysterious killer on the island who is determined to kill them after they play a game of Bloody Crayons. I think this is the first Filipino horror that I've ever talked about here on my channel, and it is a wonder that this movie ever got made in the first place, because it had a cast change, and then it got another cast change, and then the director got changed, and just as they were about to film it, they switched half the cast out again. It has also been described as so bad it is actually good, and occasionally I do like a little bit of trash horror. It feeds my soul in a very different way to underground women's fight clubs, we'll say that. But I am also familiar with the game that this is based on, like Bloody Crayons is a truth or dare game, and it's also a drinking game of a sort, but a gross kind of drinking game. Everybody puts crayons into a container and you draw one out, and every time that you draw a red crayon, you have to get a liquid or some kind of like squishy substance of your choice and put it in a cup. And the person that draws the last red crayon has to drink whatever is in the cup. But it appears that they have taken the game of Bloody Crayons and added a different twist on it, so that each crayon that you pull actually has a different kind of like connotation or association to it. So I'm interested to see how they've taken this original game and turned it into a slasher movie. And it's also based on a book, so if the movie's at least decent, I possibly could be tempted to pick up the book, but I can't make any guarantees on that. It depends on how good the movie is. Mum and Dad from 2008 is a horror thriller. Airport cleaner Lena finds herself stranded late one night after work. Her chirpy colleague Birdie offers to help her out by letting her stay with him and his family for the night. It soon becomes apparent, though, that this act of kindness is far more sinister. As Lena enters Birdie's house, she is introduced to Mum and Dad and their world of torture and murder. Mum and Dad has been on my radar for easily 15 years at this point. I remember seeing the trailer for this one on another DVD that I was watching around the time, and I think it was possibly one of the Saw movies. So that should tell you a little bit about what this movie is going to be like. On IMDb, it is often recommended with movies like Vile, Chained, or The Tortured. So to try and keep this YouTube friendly, it is on the torture corn side of horror. And occasionally, I quite like one of these movies. I know that not everybody likes these kind of movies, but I quite like a gritty, gory good time. And it helps as well that somebody that I follow on Instagram recently watched this movie and was like, holy hell, this was great, gory and brutal. It's just another selling point. So it's finally time that I get round to watching Mum and Dad. Alligator 2, The Mutation from 1991 is a creature feature horror. Deep in the sewers beneath Regent Park, a baby alligator feeds on the experimental animals discarded by Future Chemical Corporation. Nourished by the toxic growth hormones and the other mutating chemicals, the gator grows immense in size. Now a police detective must team together with a Cajun hunter to find the giant reptile in the city's sewers. Is anyone even remotely surprised that I have put a giant alligator / giant crocodile movie on this list? Because if you know me, you'll know they're kind of my guilty pleasure at this point. I first watched the original Alligator from 1980 back in 2023, so I thought that it was finally time to see what was going on with the sequel. I have heard that this is kind of like a rehash of the original Alligator, but as it's only a two-parter, I feel like it is finally time that I actually watched its sequel to say that I've watched everything that Alligator can throw at me. And I have seen the alligator in this, and he's pretty damn massive, but is he going to be as massive as Ramon from the first one? Because you name your gator and I'm 100% here for it. And it's also why I named my weighted anxiety plush, which is an alligator, Ramon. Cheerleader Camp from 1988 is a slasher horror comedy. Cheerleader Allison is plagued by nightmares about the up-and-coming All-States final and attends a summer training camp with her teammates, but one by one the cheerleaders become the targets of an unknown killer in the remote summer camp. In 2024, I watched Auntie Lee's Meat Pies and Evil Toons for the first time, and I loved them both. But not for the reason that I am about to mention. Now, both of those movies happen to star actresses who are well known for, to keep this in YouTube-friendly terms again, getting their chesty besties or more out on camera in either magazines like Playboy or in spicy adult content movie. You get where I'm going here. So as you can guess, both of those two movies are a, like, sexy, campy, good time, and I recommend both of them if you haven't seen them. But when I was looking for more recommendations that were similar when floating around on IMDb, like I like to do in my spare time, Cheerleader Camp kept cropping up because it happens to star quite a few of the same people that were in those two movies. And then I saw who the lead was in this, and it is a very young Betsy Russell, who I think more people would probably know now as Jill Tuck, aka Jigsaw's wife. in the Saw franchise. So I guess I'm watching Cheerleader Camp to try and complete the, like, sexy campy trifecta. You know, who knows? Maybe this is going to be a thing that Hordes now finds, like, spicy horror movies starring ladies that were not very well known as actresses and more for other things. Evil Dead from 2013 is a supernatural horror. 5 friends decide to spend a weekend in a remote cabin located deep in the forest. When they discover the Book of the Dead, they unwittingly summon a dormant demon living in the nearby woods, which possesses the youngsters in succession until only one is left intact to fight for survival. I think out of everything on this list, the one that most people are going to be the most surprised to find out that I haven't watched is The Evil Dead from 2013. And yes, before anybody asks, I have seen the original movies, and I have also seen every single episode of the TV show Ash vs. Evil Dead, mainly because Lucy Lawless is in the first 2 seasons. But I kind of just put this one on the back burner because back in 2013, my life was all kinds of chaos, we'll put it that way. And I just kind of forgot that it existed. You would think that Evil Dead Rise coming out would have kind of rejigged something in my memory, but no, it didn't. And when I was watching a movie recently, I can't remember what it was, the trailers started rolling at the beginning and I got really pulled into one of these trailers, like, what the hell is this? And it turned out it was the trailer for Evil Dead that I had completely forgotten about. And I was like, I now need to go and watch this movie. So I have a physical copy of it. So now I have no excuse, and I need to now find out, because, believe it or not, they're now doing a 3rd movie in the new Evil Dead series. Legion from 2010 is a religious fantasy horror. When a group of strangers at a dusty roadside diner come under attack from demonic forces, their only chance for survival lies in an archangel named Michael, who informs a pregnant waitress that her unborn child is humanity's last hope. For years, and I mean literally years, I have been seeing pictures and clips of Doug Jones, actor and contortionist, who is probably best well known for doing the Pale Man in Pan's Labyrinth, as the ice cream man in this movie. And I have no idea, like, how he fits into this movie, but I now need to know. I know that it's about angels, I know that it's about demons, and I know at one point an old lady's face gets all gnarly and weird and she tries to bite somebody in a diner. But this has been sat on my shelves for, again, literally years. Probably at this point 8 years I've had a physical copy of this one and still not got around to it. I also don't think I've ever seen anything that is like religious fantasy horror, at least nothing that stuck with me. And for me, religious horror has been kind of stale because there's been a lot of like the same going on over the past couple of years. So I'm hoping if I go back in time just that little bit, it might actually get me interested in the genre again. Ghost Squad from 2018 is a Japanese action horror comedy. Rika defends the ghosts of 3 murdered women whose final wishes are to rest in peace. After the ghosts help her murder her abusive boyfriend, the 4 of them join forces in a bloody campaign of vengeance. Of course, I was going to add something from my boy Noboru Iguchi on this list. If you don't know him by name, you may possibly know him better from his filmography. He's the director/writer behind movies such as Got It Lita Battle Bear, Dead Sushi, and Zombie-ass Toilet of the Dead. He makes the most insane, off-the-wall Japanese horror comedies, which is one of my favourite things in the world to watch. Like, the more insane and off-the-wall, the better. But Ghost Squad is also considered the worst movie that he has ever made, and as somebody that loves his movie, I'll be the judge of that, thank you very much, because this one, it appeals to me because if you've seen the trailer, one of the ghosts has a pizza cutter for a hand. Like, I need to know how that accident happened for a start. Also, a little bit of help here if anybody can help me out. I have been looking for his movie, Mutant Girl Squad, in Japanese for years, and I can only find the horrendous English dubbed version, so if you know where I can find it, please help a girl out because it would be very much appreciated. Alice Kills from 2011 is a horror thriller. After accidentally knocking her best friend off a roof, Alice is haunted by guilt and delves into a brutal nightmare wonderland of sex, drugs, and violence, her mind tearing itself apart along the way, along with anyone else who gets in her way. You show me a woman standing in a kitchen, chopping something up and adding it into a blood-coated blender. It's gonna pique my interest, and conveniently, that was the first image that I ever saw of Alice Kills, along with a second image of somebody with a badly scarred face and their head wrapped in bandages. And the tagline for this movie is, "She was always a bit weird, she's now truly insane," which I can absolutely get behind. Reviews for this one say that it's a little bit of a slow burn movie until the last 20 minutes. Now, I don't mind a slow burn movie every now and then, but I'm here for the description of the last 20 minutes. Like, you give me a blood-soaked, gory, insane good time at the end of a slow burn, like that kind of payoff, I'll watch your movie, because that sounds like something I would well and truly be interested in. And I want to know as well just how sort of similar the parallels are in this, because yes, it is obviously inspired by Alice in Wonderland, but in a, like, normal, realistic kind of setting. We're not surrounded by, like, 12-foot flowers. Pinocchios Revenge from 1996 is a slasher horror. A suburban defense lawyer mistakenly gives her troubled daughter Zoe a wooden puppet belonging to a deceased serial killer. Pinocchio promises he'll behave if Zoe promises that she will cut his strings, but when Zoe complies, the mysterious murders begin. Before anyone asks, yes, this gets terrible reviews, and no, I do not care. We are very much in the era of horror at the moment where childhood nostalgia is being milked for all it is worth, and on a budget of nothing, and cash grab movies are being churned out like there is no tomorrow. I hate a cash grab movie. Like, put some effort into a movie or don't even bother. Like, I hate a cash grab movie. But this, while it does play into childhood nostalgia, happens to be something else that I love rooting out, because this, believe it or not, is a Child's Play knockoff, and I love finding Child's Play knockoff movies. It's one of my favourite franchises, but I love getting some kind of laugh out of them, and this has the most 90s looking puppet that you have ever seen. With this thing is like a 6-year-old's nightmare fuel. It is like creepy beyond belief, but it would step right into a kid's TV show from the 90s and blend in perfectly, because oh boy, what was going on with our kids shows back in the 90s? Like, the puppetry was terrifying. Cellar Dweller from 1988 is a monster fantasy horror. Colin Childress, a highly successful comic book artist who gains inspiration from a mystical book of horrific drawings, inadvertently summons an evil spirit to his basement studio. Decades later, his house becomes a small art institute run by the stern Mrs. Briggs. One night, commonly student Whitney Taylor goes rooting around in sealed boxes in the cellar and releases the supernatural forces that have been trapped there. 2024 was the year of Jeffrey Combs movies for me, and I am not about to stop this right now because I seem to be trying to work my way through his horror filmography. I first watched Reanimator last year and added Herbert West to my favourite characters of all time, and in that video a few of you actually asked me if I had ever seen Cellar Dweller, and as I am still on a journey into 80s horror movies, the answer at the time was no, but I obviously have gone away and looked into this movie for it to appear on this list. Jeffrey Combs, big tick. Practical effects, big tick. And then I read the plot, and it sounds an awful lot like the movie Groundhog Day meets Evil Toons minus Chesty Besties. And anything that gives me Evil Toons vibes, I am 100% going to be here for. So I'm finally going to get round to ticking off a few more things from Jeffrey Combs this year, starting with Cellar Dweller. Death Tube from 2010 is a Japanese death game horror. Hideaki gets hooked on a website called DeathTube, which broadcasts actual murders in real time. At first, he doesn't believe it is real until he is kidnapped and wakes up the next day in his classroom along with his classmates. They are all trapped and held captive by hooded figures where everyone is forced to play a brutal and violent game or be killed. The second Japanese death game movie here on this list, and I have owned the DVD for this one for at least 5 years, and it's just sort of sat there, and I've watched every single other death game movie that I could find instead of it. but I recently heard somebody describe this movie as Saw meets 13 The Game of Death. And if you didn't know, Saw is my favourite horror franchise, and 13 The Game of Death was one of the top 15 movies that I actually watched in 2024, and I watched 192 movies last year. So this has immediately put DeathTube back on my radar. And then I rewatched the trailer to get familiar with it and saw that the villain in this is a mascot that is a giant yellow bear who has a mustache and has a tiny, tiny top hat perched between his ears, which is an immediate selling point and the sort of insanity that I can get behind. The Pool from 2018 is a Thai survival creature horror. Day, an insecure art director of a commercial production company, is left alone to clear up a 6-meter deep deserted pool after a shoot. He falls asleep on an inflatable raft due to unbearable fatigue. When he wakes up, the water level has sunk so low that he cannot climb out of the pool on his own. He screams for help, but the only thing that hears him is a creature from a nearby crocodile farm. Say hello to the second crocodile/alligator movie on this list, and you can thank the channel How to Beat for this one, because they put this one on my radar when they made the video, How to Beat the 6-meter hell, the pool. And all I can say is, do I want to be stuck in an empty swimming pool with a crocodile? Absolutely not. Like, small locations and alligators/crocodiles is never going to be a combination, especially as this is a saltwater crocodile. And if you didn't watch my video for Rogue, you might not know that alligators can actually climb 6 feet using their tails. They have developed the skill to climb trees now, which is slightly terrifying, I'm not gonna lie. But the pool happens to be, if you can't go up to escape what is trying to hunt you down, you have to go down. And do I want to be stuck in this set of like tubes underneath a swimming pool in the drainage system with something that could be as long as 17 feet? No. The Pale Door from 2020 is a supernatural Wild West horror. The Dalton gang finds shelter in a seemingly uninhabited ghost town after a train robbery goes south. Seeking help for their wounded leader, they are surprised to stumble across a welcoming brothel in the town square, but the beautiful women who greet them are actually a coven of witches with very sinister plans for the unsuspecting outlaws. Ye Olde Wildy West and a coven of witches? Sold. You can thank Red Dead Redemption and the movie Calamity Jane for my love of cowboy movies, so thanks Grandma, I guess I kind of owe you for this one. But when it comes to Ye Olde Wildy West movies, is there really anything better than someone tied to a set of train tracks while somebody plays a piano frantically off screen, or a good old train heist? And that is the exact starting point for The Pale Door. And in the trailer for this, it's about a coven of witches. I want to know how they go from like pretty ladies to looking like gnarly burnt feral things that are crawling on the ceiling like giant spiders. Like, how did we get from A to what the hell is happening? Because I now need to know, because this doesn't seem to me like your standard coven of witches. You can wear a deer skull on your head all you like, but how the hell do you end up looking like a piece of charcoal crawling around like a spider? Bloody Muscle Bodybuilder in Hell from 1995 is a Japanese supernatural horror comedy. Bodybuilder Shinji meets his ex-girlfriend to help her research on a haunted house. Accompanied by a professional psychic, they visit an abandoned house where they find themselves trapped and tormented by a ghost with a 30-year grudge. If you're familiar with Japanese horror movies, you may also know Bloody Muscle Bodybuilder from Hell by a different name, because it is also known as Japanese Evil Dead. And I thought, considering I've got the newer version of Evil Dead on my list, I might as well knock this one out at the same time, because oh boy, does this look like the insanity that I can get behind. If you haven't seen pictures of this or the trailer, do yourself a favour and just go and watch it, because I now need to know why all the ghosts are blue. I get that they are blue because they're ghosts, but baby blue is a choice. It looks gory, it looks insane. Like, you want to give me Evil Dead, like classic Evil Dead, but just make it off the wall with a really buff man as the protagonist, of course I'm gonna watch it. Deadtime Stories from 1986 is a horror anthology. A babysitting uncle tells his charges 3 horror stories about a killer witch, Little Red Riding Hood and a werewolf, and a story about a killer Goldilocks and the 3 bears. I wanted to include an anthology on this list, but I also wanted something that was like 80s cheesy goodness, which is where Deadtime Stories happens to come in, because this is a 2-for-1. It's an anthology that is also the cheesiest 80s thing that you will probably see on this list. It is so nostalgic looking for the TV shows that I grew up on. Think things like Goosebumps, Are You Afraid of the Dark, Round the Twist, Grizzly Tales for Gruesome Kids, like all of these kinds of shows, but then tailor them for an adult audience. And then I saw that there was puppets in this, and if you don't know, I am a sucker for puppets in adult horror. Conspiracy from 2012 is a found footage mockumentary horror thriller. 2 young filmmakers select a crazed conspiracy theorist as the subject for their next project, but they soon come to believe that the man isn't as delusional as they originally thought, after the filmmakers uncover an ancient and dangerous secret society. I just heard some of you say, but Hordes, you don't like found footage movies very much. And to you I say, you are correct, but there is one type of found footage movie that I do really enjoy, and that is a mockumentary. Think something along the lines of the Poughkeepsie tapes, or Horror in the High Desert, or The Bay. They're the 3 that I can think of off the top of my head. You give me a fake documentary that looks like a legit documentary, and I'm gonna be here for it, because I love a documentary any day of the week. The Conspiracy came out in 2012, and the iceberg for conspiracy theories has only got weirder and wilder since then. And I would say, how do people end up listening to this kind of stuff and believing in it? But then these are also the sort of people that end up in cults. Like, there is genuinely a connection between people who believe in conspiracy theories and people who end up in cults, because both of them, when they leave these movements, actually go to therapists to get deprogrammed. Like, that is how deep these kind of thoughts become ingrained in people. Now, this movie happens to deal with a real conspiracy theory, and it is about the New World Order. And when I say New World Order, I mean the whole idea that the elites are like a secret organization running the world, not the faction from WCW, because that would be a very different movie, but would also be full of lies and fabrications if you happen to know who the members of that faction were. The Cottage from 2008 is a crime horror comedy. David and his brother Peter kidnap Tracy, a gangster's daughter, and hide out in the middle of the British countryside. But David and Peter find that they have much more to worry about than just head crime boss stepdad when they also cross paths with a psychotic farmer, and all hell breaks loose. This movie gives me Texas Chainsaw Massacre meets Cannibals and Carpet Fitters, starring Andy Serkis, who, if you didn't know, was Gollum in Lord of the Rings. Every single person, if you live in the UK or even in Ireland, knows a tiny village like the setting for this one. It is a village where everybody knows absolutely everybody, and everybody knows exactly what everybody else is up to. Like, privacy does not exist in these tiny villages because noses are in everybody's business. Now, you take this setting and add in 2 idiots in a kidnapping plot, a mob boss from London, Chinese hitman, and a farmer that looks like Frankenstein's monster who kills people using a shovel. And I'm not gonna, like, that sounds like a great time to me. Plus, there is a cameo in this by Doug Bradley, who is playing one of the villagers. So Pinhead technically lives somewhere in England. The Wizard of Gore from 2007 is a splatter horror. Montag the Magnificent is a master illusionist who performs at underground venues, selecting female volunteers from his rave-like audiences. To their hysteria, it appears he has dismembered their bodies, but his sleight of hand has them fooled. However, female bodies show up dead from the same wounds performed on stage. Investigators are baffled, and the chase to find the killer begins. When I say I have tried to find this movie for literally years, I am not even kidding. One of my subscribers nicely left me a comment asking me if I had seen The Wizard of Gore from 2007, not the original one from the 70s, And I responded saying that I had been trying to find a copy of this in the UK for literally years. And I kid you not, the very next week, I found a copy here in the UK for just a couple of quid. Pounds for my Americans out there who don't know what a quid is. And I can finally say that I get to watch The Wizard of Gore, the splatter movie about magic. And I love a weird magic show. Like, give me, like, Penn and Teller, but dark and twisted, and I'm gonna be here for it. And then you also look at the cast for this movie. Like, it's a splatter movie, it's starring Brad Dourif, Bijou Phillips, and Jeffrey Combs is also in this one as well, which is why I've been searching for this movie for literally, like, that cast speaks to my soul, and I'm gonna need to watch this one sooner rather than later because I just want to watch somebody do the saw the lady in half trick and her actually get sawn in half, or even worse. Insidious from 2010 is a supernatural horror. Shortly after moving, a family discovers that dark spirits have possessed their home and that their son has inexplicably fallen into a coma. Trying to escape the hauntings and save their son, they move again only to realise that it was not their house that was actually haunted. This may sound bad, but I always forget that the Insidious franchise exists in the first place until a new movie comes out, and then I'm like, oh yeah, Insidious is the thing, isn't it? Which may explain why I still haven't watched Insidious. And believe it or not, it is actually getting a 6th entry into the franchise coming out on August 29th this year, meaning that it now has 6 entries in this franchise, and it is joining other franchises like Final Destination, which is also getting its 6th entry this year, The Exorcist, and Sharknado. One of these things is not like the other, we'll say, but they also have 6 entries in the horror franchise sphere. Now, the thing with Insidious is, it's James Wan and Lee Wanell. And if you don't know, those are 2 big powerhouse names behind the original Saw movies. So I should like this franchise. So I don't know why it's taken me this long to actually get round to watching it. Besides the fact that I've seen the demon and it makes me laugh every time I see it, because the fact that it's called the lipstick demon, yeah, that's not a terrifying demon in the slightest to me. But this movie, for a long time, was wildly to be, it was considered to be one of the scariest movies of all time. So here we are, 10 years later, and I want to see if it can still hold up to that claims. Like, is that statement still gonna ring true? As the Gods Will from 2014 is a Japanese death game horror. Second-year high school student Shun lives an ordinary teenage life until one day he is suddenly forced to participate in a series of children's games with death as the penalty for losing. With no knowledge who is behind these games, he is left with no other choice but to keep winning as his only means of protecting himself and possibly make it out alive. You may have heard the description for this one and thought to yourself, Hordes, this sounds an awful lot like the TV show Squid Games. And to you I would say, you are absolutely correct, because there have been numerous discussions online about this one and whether Squid Games is actually a plagiarism of As the Gods Will. As the Gods Will originally started off as a manga. It had 2 seasons. The first season was 5 volumes long and ran between 2011 and 2012, with the second season being 21 volumes long that ran between 2013 and 2016. And I have actually read part of season 2 of this. Now, the director of Squid Games actually denies all of these allegations and says that he came up with the idea back in 2009. But the fact that you didn't put out your project for so long, people are going to draw comparisons, considering that they are both things that deal with... They're death games where you play kids games to either stay alive or die. Like, you can't deny the comparisons that are going to get made there. But this has been on my radar since before the TV show Squid Games, because it just looks insane. One of the games has got a giant polar bear in it, and if you asked me in my honest opinion, I think As the Gods Will looks like a better version of Squid Games. Like, Red Light Green Light is the best game in Squid Games. It's why it's back for season 2. Like, it's the only game that anybody ever remembers in Squid Games. But As the Gods Will, Both seasons of the manga have some of the most iconic games that you will ever come across in a death game, and the movie happens to be the first 5 volumes of season 1, all condensed into a movie. So there you have it, the 25 horror movies that I am planning on knocking off of my watch list in 2025. I am also bringing back my 150 horror movies throughout the entire year challenge, so who knows what number I am going to end up with at the end of the year, because in 2024 I watched 192 movies, which is a whole different level of insanity. Like I said at the beginning though, if you do want to see me do video reviews for any of these movies, let me know in the comments section down below. And all of them though, I will do little reviews of, like I do for everything, over on Instagram and Letterboxd at Hordes of Horror, where you can also find me if you want to follow me over there as well. But here on YouTube, I'll be back on Monday, and this time it is finally time to get back to watching one of the movies that I wanted to prioritise during the winter. And I can't not watch the movie about the adorable Sasquatch, because if you've seen the Sasquatch in Abominable, he's so cute and I just want to watch him kill people. So I'm watching Abominable from 2006. So until next time, bye.